Hi, I'm Barry Nolan.
And I'm Sarah Edwards. Our regular edition of Evening Magazine won't be here tonight.
We make way so that our own Steve Aveson can bring you his New England Portrait Special.
At 101 years old, Ruby Hemingway is probably the country's oldest journalist. Jack Swedberg has photographed him all his life, and now he wants to reintroduce the eagle to the Quabbin Reservoir. Elaine Corey is a teacher, choreographer, and director of some of the country's most talented young people. David Bunker has spent the majority of his life in an institution, and now he puts his life into words as the poet of the Fernald School. Listen as these four people share their stories on our New England Portrait Special.
I've always enjoyed the images at Old Sturbridge Village. The interpreters here provide a kind of living portrait of the pioneering spirit of the 19th century New England farmer. When we started our New England Portrait series a year ago, I often wondered if there'd be a common thread to the stories that we did, or if it'd just be a collection of pieces under the same title. But as time has passed, I've discovered a real spirit in the subject of our pieces, which is actually a reflection of the spirit of all people in New England.
What are New England portraits? Well, they're about the people of New England. Ordinary folks just like you and me, only just a little bit different. Butchers and ball players, magicians and museum directors. They are teachers that teach and singers that sing.
That's gonna bring.
But they do it with a quality that leaves you remembering. From the ferryboat captain in Maine providing a lifeline to Monhegan Island, to the Indian chief in Providence, passing language on to the next generation.
Cheerio.
Their lives tell a story that is a privilege to share because they bring something to this party called life and they leave it there.
There you go.
They're ordinary people, just like you and me. We call them New England portraits. Sister Barbara Scanlon is a portrait. Counseling runaways is not just a 9-to-5 job for her. Up to 500 young people receive her personal attention every year. The job is filled with unpublicized rewards and private struggles.
I think every person who does this kind of work at some point has to pray, whether they do it formally or informally or how they define it, because you need to get strength. I mean, if you give, not that you're not getting too. It's a two-way street. It really is, but you have to say at some point, you know, why is there all this pain?
And George Gloss was a portrait. Sitting among the stacks of the Brattle bookstore, he traveled around the world through books and took his customers along with him.
My whole life, it's a great joy every day. And like Jim Hawkins in Treasure Island, I'm finding treasures and all kinds of autographs and manuscripts and documents. And these are so enheartening that every day is a joy and adventure. Jim Hawkins out for the treasures.
And just where would the kids from the Cambridge Ringe and Latin Percussion Ensemble be if it weren't for Jimmy Smith? Well, some of them think it would not be in school.
Ending of that again. Don't move. Don't move. I don't care if you make a mistake or not. Do not move. Once you move, you've broken concentration. Once you break concentration, everybody focuses everything on you.
They make a difference in the quality of life because they don't wait for others to build bridges. They get involved with a spirit that is New England, a spirit perhaps best described in our portrait of storyteller J. O'Callahan.
I see that as a New England quality. Ability to bruise the air and march on with life, and underneath, you're not quite as tough, but you're going to go on and deal with life because it's worth it.
It really is New England.
Yeah. Smell it in the air.
In the last year, we've done 35 New England portraits, stories that I think begin to capture the spirit of the people of New England. But after all, television can only offer you a glimpse of people's lives in 3 to 5 minutes. But in a couple of moments, we're going to meet Elaine Corey, a woman who packs more life into 5 minutes than most of us pack into a weekend. But then again, she has to. She works with teenagers. I think most folks will agree that while life is less difficult than it used to be, it's a whole lot more complicated, especially if you're a young person facing it alone. Fortunately, there's a whole category of persons set aside to help young people. They're called teachers. They don't get paid a lot of money, you don't read about them in the newspapers, but there they are on the front lines helping teenagers become young adults. Elaine Corey is a teacher. She's a teacher of theater, and she's one of the best around.
It's a difficult time in life when you're no longer a child and not quite an adult. And today's teenagers may be the most complex and least understood cross-section of Boston's population. But that's the perfect group for the Boston Youth Theater and Elaine Corey.
Know when you leave your spot, where you're going, and get there. Randy, I got the sense you kind of got in the general area, and then it was like, I know Ark was around here somewhere, and oh, here it is, yep, there it is. A lot of my friends said, you're mad. You're giving up a regular job, at that point I was a teacher, to go lose money in the theater with kids, teenagers. You don't do that. And when we put a show in the Charles Playhouse, which cost a lot of money, they said, you are going to lose your shirt.
She didn't expect to make a lot of money when she began the Boston Youth Theater, and since 1977, her main reward has been to coordinate and direct the energies of Boston's most talented young people as they write, sing, act, and dance their way from the streets to the stage.
In a way, it's a sort of living sculpture. It's a dramatic representation of the spirit of a generation. There are art forms which express all sorts of things. You know, the beauty of the human form in sculpture, and, you know, there's all sorts of things. Our art form represents that. It's the feelings, the expressions, the thoughts, the spirit of what it is to be 19 years old.
You can't keep being invisible.
I don't want to be invisible. I just want to be.
Of course you just want to be. But you're going to have to start learning how to fight.
What kind of things do kids learn at the Boston Youth Theater?
They learn how to do all kinds of things you have to do to be really good on any job. But they also learn to stick by their guns. They learn to put themselves into what they're doing, that just doing it isn't good enough, that if it doesn't have a piece of you in it somewhere, it's not as good as it can be. And they also learn that they should be as good as they can be. It's never good enough. If you are a dancer, if you move in this section, I know you can't start from the fourth step. You have to. The story of the theater, in a certain sense, and how it keeps happening, is the message that we keep giving to the kids, which is, if something is worth doing, you can't listen to the people who tell you how impossible it is. You have to simply do it. And you may not know exactly how, but you'll figure it out. If you make the attempt, if you go out and you take that step, you can do that impossible thing. You know, ending world hunger, you know, making sure that we don't blow ourselves off the face of the earth. All of the important questions have people, most people, running around saying, that's impossible, it can't be done, it can't be done. And those are the only things worth spending your time on, are the impossible things, as far as I'm concerned.
Many of her kids have gone on to become professional singers, dancers, and actors, but more importantly to Elaine Corey, all of them have gone on to become successful and motivated young adults. Jack Swedberg has realized a lot of success in his work. His films and photographs have been recognized for their excellence across the country, but more importantly to him, they've helped raise a consciousness about our national bird, the eagle.
The Quabbin Reservoir is a beautiful place during the wintertime, but for some, it is simply a source of drinking water many miles west of Boston, while for others, the Quabbin is an accidental wilderness and potential home for our national bird and symbol, the bald eagle. Jack Swedberg is the senior wildlife photographer for the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife and a lifelong resident of Western Massachusetts.
Well, I think the very first eagle that I saw was from a big ledge in Quabbin. Up to that time, I had never seen one. And I saw him framed against the blue water, and that really turned me on. And I thought then, well, I should have a camera. And the thing progressed that way, seeing these things and being interested. And of course, once I got into the photography, then to photograph eagles became not an obsession, but a challenge.
Over the last 25 years, Jack has accepted that challenge and won numerous awards along the way for advancing the understanding of wildlife through his photography, with special recognition for his work with eagles.
What's the most beautiful thing about eagles to you?
Well, it's their strong flight. On a given day when the wind is right and the birds are up flying and they get up there and they just fly on that wind, and you can see they're such powerful flyers, never even have to flap their wings. They can just soar up there forever, and it's their flight. It's very majestic.
Jack's current work involves the Eagle Project, an effort to introduce breeding eagles into the Quabbin Reservoir area, something that hasn't happened in Massachusetts since the turn of the century. Don't go away. When we return, we'll meet David Bunker. After 25 years, he's the poet of the Fernald School. To 40 years ago, if you had cerebral palsy, chances are you'd end up in a mental health facility. Why? Because people just didn't know any better. That's precisely what happened to David Bunker. And though things have changed in the world of medicine since that time, David's residence has not changed. The Fernald School is home for David. It's where he sings, it's where he works, it's where he plays in the Special Olympics, and recently it's where he began writing poetry.
The Walter E. Fernald School was the first publicly funded institution for the mentally retarded in the Western Hemisphere. And while it might be difficult for some folks to imagine finding poetry within the confines of the school, that is precisely what you would discover if you spent some time with David Bunker.
The little green man did a jig, jumped up, and sang some funny songs. He took off his hat and threw it in the air. He made everyone laugh and cry. He was a funny little man.
David Bunker has been a resident at the Fernald School since March 18th, 1949. He has cerebral palsy, but while his body may be handicapped, his mind knows few limitations. He sings in the Fernald Chorus, wins medals in the Special Olympics, he even earns money in the school's Flow Work program. And 2 years ago, he took up a new pastime, writing poetry.
Well, it might take me a long time to think about it, find someone to help me write. The way when I started writing stories, I had a tutor and they'd bring me a magazine in, and then the major when, where, what words, and tell me go through the magazine and write up a story. 2 lines, elaborate a little bit what the story I thought was about.
What's your favorite story that you have ever written, or your favorite poem?
I guess, a happy face and alone. I guess my three poems that I wrote the other day. I took a walk. I had two all written, but the third one took me a long while to write because I used to go throw rocks, throw stones in the water, and get the reflection of me, and that inspired me to write the poem about I took a walk to find the real me.
The other day, I took a walk down to the sea to get a better look at me. Not at the reflection seen in the waves, but the me inside, different in many ways. To get away from the city lights and ugly sights, pollution, smog, and into the salt air fog. To find the real me is why I took this walk. I didn't talk, I just walked to find the me I thought I'd lost.
I think your poetry would inspire a lot of people, both people inside the school and out.
I think a lot of people have recognized my poetry and stuff.
Does that make you happy and proud?
Yeah.
It should. It's really good.
Yeah. That's how I think I meet a lot of my friends. They say, yes, we know David through his poetry.
His poetry has been enjoyed by friends, even published in the Fernald newsletter. And for David, that's a kind of sharing that comes quite naturally.
I've made a lot of people, sad people, happy. I said just something out of the ordinary and make them they'd laugh, and said, long as you're feeling all right, that's all that counts.
Alone is not just by yourself. Alone is inside. When you think no one cares, or when time seems to stop, on sad moments. Alone is even when you write a poem and no one ever reads it.
I spoke with David recently, and I continue to be impressed with how many things he has going all at the same time. He still writes his poetry, he's working out for the Special Olympics, and he's most proud of singing in the holiday chorus where he has a solo. In a moment, we'll meet a woman who's accomplished quite a bit in her lifetime, Ruby Hemingway. 10 years ago, she began writing a weekly news column, and at the age of 101, she's the country's oldest journalist. If there is a pattern in the subjects of our New England portraits, I think it's reflected in the spirit of the people. A spirit of perseverance, a spirit of getting on with life despite adversity or perhaps because of it. And if there's one person who best exemplifies that spirit of endurance, I think that person would be Ruby Hemingway.
Sometimes it's kind of fun to write things that I'm thinking about. and just write them down as if I was talking.
I'll bet an awful lot of memories dance within the walls of that 19th century barn. You know, that barn's pretty unique because along with that farmhouse over here, it presents one of the few remaining examples of 19th century homesteads still standing in Franklin County out in western Massachusetts. But it's unique for another reason as well. It's the birthplace of Ruby Hemingway, a 19th century woman whose stories still dance from her memory onto the written page every week.
Farms were all inhabited by families who grew up and worked on the farm until, if there were too many boys, some of them had to go outside. But a good many times, generations of them worked on the same farm and got on very well.
She'll be 101 this January, and for the last 10 years, Ruby Hemingway has written a weekly column of recollections for the Greenfield Recorder called I Remember When.
Well, I suppose it brings to mind things that they never thought of. And so many people have no idea of the things that were old, that's never crossed their mind. Why a stone wall? And they haven't any conception of what it would be without electricity.
The weekly column springs from her memory and inspires the imagination of her readers as well as the staff of the paper.
I think that's what part of her appeal is, that everything's upbeat. And even now she'll say, isn't it wonderful to be living today? And she just, everything that happens, she's just so wide-eyed about, and she isn't a bit cynical. That's what's so great about her.
I think there's so much that is artificial, and they're so busy and so pushed all the time. I think sometimes they'd be better off if they lived a quieter life, same as they used to. But progress has got to go on.
You've seen so many changes. I wonder, do you ever get curious about the future?
Well, I've wondered a lot about that. What kind of development there's going to be. But it's sure to be something. And I'd like to know what it would be in even 25 years. Some of the customs and some of the work and machines and transportation and flying and everything is going to be different in 25 years.
Do you ever think about death and dying, about what it would be like for you to pass on?
No, I don't bother with it. That's something that I don't think much about, but I have always been curious about a great many things, and that's one of the things. But I don't think much about it anyway. It's enough to do to keep up with the modern times when you're living.
Thank you very much.
These stories have helped strengthen my idea of what kind of person makes a New England portrait. And that really comes in handy when I try to explain to my mom out in San Francisco why I choose to live in New England. There's an adversity here that's reflected in the weather. And the way people in New England cope with it has always impressed me. People here take obstacles and they convert them into tools for improving their lives and the lives of those people around them. Perhaps you know someone who's a New England portrait, the kind of person who makes us all feel better about being a New Englander, the kind of person who I'm proud to share as a New England portrait.